Welcome to a series of brief but deep philosophical reflection. My name is Joseph, and I am simply trying to provide critical yet objective commentary on philosophy in order to carefully direct any and all along the path of right reason. This series, entitled Building a Proper Disposition, is dedicated to building a proper philosophical disposition in order to better tackle our abundant philosophical, theological, ethical, and practical dilemmas. What is my fundamental presupposition? That every person attests to his or her own personal beliefs out of some subjectively reasonable circumstance. Thus, I am aiming to illuminate the extent to which our subjective thinking may have become pure bias or even pure error. Remember, there can only be one truth, and this is out of philosophical necessity. The one self-knowledge worth having is to know one's own mind. F. H. Bradley. Building a proper disposition. Presentation 3. Reflecting on subjective biases. In the last presentation, we demonstrated the significance of striving for objective articulation rather than relying solely on subjective criticisms as the means of properly developing a worldview. But what is the main difference between objectivity and subjectivity? Well, objectivity seeks universal and impartial propositions, ones that tend to be irrefutable and metaphysically, proportionately, or reasonably unfalsifiable. For example, you will commonly hear the law of non-contradiction, or the fact that all triangles have three sides, as justifiably objective propositions. These differ from subjective statements because subjectivity focuses on the partial or preconceived notions of a subject, usually the person. For example, I think that the law of non-contradiction is posited on falsity, or I prefer square slices of pizza over triangle slices, are both subjective statements. Preference is always subjective. Even if a majority of the population prefer peace over war, it is still necessarily subjective. Just as much as claiming the law of non-contradiction results from error is a subjective claim, because simply thinking something does not necessitate it be true. How can we draw lines in our own thinking between what is objectively necessary or subjectively suitable? We cannot deny subjectivity is very important. It is what defines us as individual persons amidst the large scope of diversity, history, and inclinations, each with particular gifts and strengths as much as shortcomings and weaknesses. Subjectivity serves the person. It's what makes up our minds about what to get for dinner or which university to choose. Whereas objectivity serves order. It's what demonstrates systematic and universal articulation. In other words, objectivity is the backbone of sound subjective reasoning. We have essentially clarified the significance of objectivity in the previous presentations. Thus, in this presentation, let's focus on the subjective nuances of subjective critique and how we can reflect on our own biases and preconceptions. First, let us all affirm, I do have preconceptions. It is nearly impossible not to. Even if someone values one culture over another, not even out of distaste, but simply out of appreciation or affection, or even if one enjoys physical labor and activity more than computer work and studying, we all have predisposed preferences that have probably been compiled over years of visiting a certain part of the world, or simply repeatedly signing up for the local soccer team. Within this realm of subjective identity, there is little that can be viewed as right or wrong. We each are just enacting our own compounded experiences over the span of our life. Let's categorize these as subjective preferences, meaning that we don't have to worry about why or how such a preference came to be, but we could just keep it simple. I just prefer this over that. And who can find fault or blame in such preferences? I just prefer Democratic views more than Republican views. I just prefer religious ideas over atheistic ideas. I just prefer being gay over being straight. Okay, clearly now we might have some tensions arise, but rightfully so, as we notice these types of subjective views become polarizing when confronted. But what is the difference between whether or not someone plays soccer compared to someone's sexual preference? Well, one is a physical preference, while the other is ideological. This is the difference, and it is very necessary to distinguish the layers of subjectivity within our own lives. Thus, let's categorize these as subjective ideologies, meaning that they directly influence our own decision-making and affect our daily practices. These subjective ideologies include all the buzzwords that get us heated, like religion, sexual preference, nationality, politics, and even social identity. These are mere qualifiers of our identity, and in no way attributed to our own essential being as a humanity. Each of these categories is directly related to social and cultural landscapes, such that none of them are directly related to the essential nature of a human being. Even nationality is a social construct purely related to culture. Does that diminish their importance? Of course not. But it rightly creates a vast dichotomy of qualifiers that we each experience as well as potentially possess, either on our own accord or even out of cultural necessity. Two types of subjective categories: preference and ideology. Let's connect the two. Ideology is spurred by resonant influences external to ourselves, such as leaders, spokesmen, myth, history, and social revolution. Basically, the subjective ideologies we each currently face are not new creations, but rather continuations and developments, or even degradations, of previous subjective ideologies. These are what influence our subjective preferences to the point that I might choose to go to the bar downtown instead of right next door, due to ideological differences. I might donate to one organization over another one because of subjective ideologies. I might vote for one politician over another because of specifically subjective ideologies. You see, the ideology actuates the preference. The ideology precedes the behavior. It is the ideology that can run rampant if we do not keep it in check with proper objective propositions. As soon as a momentous group or organization catches the ideological affirmation of others, it doesn't just grow in numbers. It grows in influence and directly shapes and affects proceeding behavior and decisions. This needs to be understood on behalf of both the influencers and the influenced, those who are imitated and those doing the imitating. Now, this is the part of geopolitics that many people will begin diverging into conspiracy theories or start sputtering nonsense about aliens, brainwashing, or mind control. And while these are superficially false narratives, we should recognize the impact that promoting specific ideologies does have on ourselves and especially the younger and future generations. If we only rely on accepting at face value the ideological subjectivity placed before us via the media, television, internet, and news, we are relinquishing the very power subjective identity bestows on each one of us. In other words, if we solely give in to another's subjective ideology without properly grounding ourselves in right reason, or even challenging them with proper scrutiny, then we no longer possess the one essential characteristic of being a human, and that is personal identity. There is nothing more subjective than personal identity, the complete package of who and what you are as an individual. Now, there are plenty of things worth fighting for in this world: fairness, peace, justice, love, and unity. But at some point, we need to recognize that some very influential parties simply manipulate, exploit, and milk the very qualities of subjective ideology. I promise you, being a part of something greater than your individual self is fulfilling, but the arena is full of wolves in sheep's clothing. So be cautious and alert. Take the time to reflect on your own biases, your own preconceptions. What has shaped you into who and what you are now? Is it your experiences? Try to postulate objective values to each experience you view as so significant that it shaped you into you. Is it your teachers or your friends? Try to reflect on what could have influenced them so much that they became influential in your life. Was it their qualities, their words, their behaviors? And even above all of these external pressures, despite there being so many of them, remember your own original motivations and aspirations, the real subjective identity that you began with and have carried with you all this way. Yes, it will change because of all the complementary components we experience throughout life. After all, that is another quality of subjectivity, that it has the potential to change. But never let go of what you once thought you were, the good, the bad, or the ugly. Because sometimes you have to stare even your own self in the face and recognize just how far you have come. Let's reflect on this bit of reflection. Objective articulation will always stand the test of time, while subjective qualifiers will always have the chance to change with the times, or remain steadfast amidst the turning tides. This is the human experience in a nutshell, that we endure just as much as we grow. And as this journey takes place, we are continuously bombarded with those subjective ideologies that are mere manifestations of ideas long past, revolutions long died out, and agendas long held on to by the few and the proud. See past them, please, and conform yourself not solely to subjective qualifiers, but rather to an objective existence where each one of us is subjectively significant. You do not become valuable because of ideology. You were already valuable even before you were born, and that's a fact.